There comes a moment in every soul journey when doors shut tight, not just one, but all of them. A door of opportunity closed, a door of love locked, a door of purpose sealed shut. And no matter how hard you push, plead, or pound against them, they do not budge. You stand in a hallway of silence, where echoes of your past dreams mock your persistence, where your own footsteps feel like whispers of what once was. It is in these moments, with hands raw from knocking and a heart bruised from waiting, that a question takes shape. Why? Why does every road lead to a dead end? Why does the air grow thick with uncertainty? Why does the very ground beneath your feet seem to crumble when you need it most? It is then, right then, when all seems lost, that something is happening in the unseen. For the closed doors, the unanswered prayers, the moments of deafening silence, they are not the end. No, they are the beginning of something far greater than what you had planned. But the path to that promise is never paved in ease. No, it is a road that must be built stone by stone, step by step, with a faith that refuses to crumble under the weight of despair. She had spent years walking the same road, wearing down the path beneath her feet, with steps of certainty, of routine, of expectation. Every day she rose with the sun, believing that she knew where her journey would lead. The doors that stood before her had always been open, welcoming her with the warmth of familiarity. But then, one by one, they began to close. The first door shut without warning, and she told herself it was a mistake. The second door locked itself, and she convinced herself it was temporary. But when the last door slammed in her face, she was left standing in the cold with nothing but questions wrapped around her shoulders like a tattered cloak. She knocked. She knocked until her knuckles bled, until the weight of her own desperation pressed against her chest like an iron hand. She pleaded with a silence, begged for just a sliver of light to seep through the cracks. But the doors did not move, and so she sat in the hallway of uncertainty, where time felt slower, where fear whispered lies into her weary soul. Perhaps you know this feeling. Perhaps you too have watched doors close that you thought would stay open forever. Perhaps you have felt the sting of rejection, the ache of loss, the hollow silence of dreams deferred. And perhaps, like her, you have questioned whether you have been abandoned in the darkness, left to wander without direction. But listen to me, child. Listen with the ears of your spirit, with the depth of your soul. Closed doors are not punishments, they are protections. They are the whisper of a greater calling, the hand of unseen wisdom moving you towards something your eyes have not yet beheld. For if the doors had not closed, she would have never turned around. She would have never seen the path forming behind her, built not of her own will, but of something greater, a path she had never imagined, one that did not rely on the old, but was birthed in the new. It was not paved with certainty, nor was it lined with the comfort of familiarity. No, it was rugged, unshaped, waiting to be walked with faith alone. But fear, oh, how fear speaks in these moments. Fear will tell you to stay where you are, to keep knocking on doors that will never open again, to wrap yourself in the comfort of yesterday rather than step into the unknown of tomorrow. Fear will whisper that there is no other way, that the doors you lost were the only ones meant for you. But hear me when I say, fear is a liar. For every door that closes, a new way is formed. Not always a door, not always something immediate or visible. Sometimes it is a small crack in the wall, a narrow opening that requires patience and faith to find. Sometimes it is a path so hidden that you must walk by the whisper of your spirit alone. But one thing is certain, the journey is never meant to end in the hallway of rejection. She did not see it at first. The new way did not reveal itself in grand gestures or flashing signs. It came quietly, like the first light of dawn stretching across a darkened sky. It came through the lessons of waiting, through the refining fire of disappointment. It came through the realization that the doors had not closed to her, but for her. And so she stood. She turned from the past that could no longer hold her. She took a step forward, not knowing where the path would lead, but knowing that standing still was no longer an option. Each step felt unsteady, uncertain, but with every move forward, the way became clearer. And you, yes, you, what will you do? Will you remain before doors that will never open again? Or will you turn toward the path being formed beneath your feet? Will you keep your hands pressed against the past? Or will you open them to the possibilities ahead? The way will not always be easy. It will not always be straight. But it will be yours, crafted not by your own understanding, but by something far greater than what you could have imagined. So stand up, step forward. The closed doors were never the end. They were the beginning of something new. And when you look back, when you see how far you've come, you will know with a certainty deeper than words that every door that's shut was simply making way for the path you were always meant to walk. She walked not because she saw the full road ahead, but because she could no longer stay where she was. The air around her still carried the weight of yesterday, still whispered the names of the doors she had once leaned upon, but her spirit had grown restless. There is something about loss that changes a person, not in an instant, not with a single revelation, but in the way they start to understand the meaning of movement. At first, every step felt unnatural. She kept looking back, hoping that maybe, just maybe, one of those doors would reopen, that she would hear the familiar creak of hinges swinging wide, inviting her to return to the comfort of what once was. But nothing moved. The past had locked itself away, and no amount of longing could summon it back. And so she walked forward, even though the path before her was covered in mist, even though she could barely see beyond the next step. It is a painful thing to leave behind what once held you. It is not just about the doors that close. It is about the parts of yourself that must close with them, the dreams that no longer fit where you are going, the people who once walked beside you but can no longer keep pace. The plans you made that must now be laid to rest, not because they were unworthy, but because they were never meant to be permanent. She did not understand it then, but the shutting of those doors had not been an act of cruelty. No, they had been a kindness wrapped in sorrow, a redirection disguised as rejection. Had she stayed, she would have withered. Had she forced her way back, she would have lost herself in the process. But she did not yet know what waited for her beyond the mist. She only knew that stopping was no longer an option. The first real challenge came when she met the voices of doubt. They were not loud, not at first. They crept in quietly, seeping into the cracks of her mind like water finding its way into stone. What if this isn't leading anywhere, they whispered. What if you are simply wandering, not walking toward anything at all? She wanted to believe that there was something ahead, that all this was not in vain, but the voices made their case well. They reminded her of how things had been before, how secure she had felt when she had doors to walk through, when she had a clear destination, and they asked over and over again, why would something good be taken from you if it was meant to be replaced with something better? But then, as if the very wind carried a message meant only for her, she heard something deeper than doubt, a whisper not of fear, but of truth. Why do you assume that what you lost was the best there was? She had never thought of it that way. She had never questioned her own longing, had never stopped to ask if the things she mourned were as great as she had believed them to be. She had simply assumed that what she wanted was what was meant for her. But what if she had been wrong? What if her closed doors had not been the loss she thought they were, but the necessary ending of something far too small for who she was becoming? And so she pressed on, this time with a little more strength in her stride. The mist began to lift in places, revealing bits of the path beneath her feet. It was different from the roads she had known before, wilder, untamed, not yet fully formed. There were no markers, no signs telling her how far she had left to go, but something about it felt right, as though it had been waiting for her all along. She was not the same person who had once stood before those locked doors. The waiting had changed her. The loss had refined her. She had learned that strength is not in never being broken, but in choosing to rise, even when the pieces of your past still rattle inside you. She had learned that the absence of familiar doors does not mean the absence of direction. And she had learned that sometimes the only way to build something new is to first be stripped of everything that was holding you in place. She did not know where the path would lead, but she no longer needed to. The journey itself was shaping her, revealing to her that the greatest roads are often the ones not yet paved. She began to see signs, not the kind written in stone, but the kind that whispered through the wind, that echoed in the steady beat of her own footsteps. A chance encounter that lit a spark in her soul, an idea that had been buried beneath the weight of her old plans, now unearthed and gleaming with possibility. A moment of clarity that told her she had been moving toward this all along, even when she could not see it. She had once feared the unknown, but now she saw it for what it was. Not a void, not an empty place, but a canvas yet to be painted, a road yet to be traveled. And she was not alone on this journey. Though she could not always see it, though she could not always feel it, something greater than her own will was guiding her. The path had been built with hands far wiser than her own, and though it had not been revealed all at once, it had never stopped forming beneath her feet. She thought back to the doors that had closed, and for the first time she did not feel pain when she remembered them. They had served their purpose. They had been necessary for a season, but they had never been meant to hold her forever. The path she walked now was proof that what once felt like an ending had always been a beginning in disguise. She did not know what lay ahead. She did not need to. For the first time, she was at peace with the unknown. She was not standing before closed doors anymore. She was walking a new path, one that had been waiting for her all along. And step by step, she was learning to trust that the way would continue to unfold exactly as it was meant to. She kept walking, not because she had all the answers, but because stopping now would mean betraying everything she had come to understand. The doors had closed. That was undeniable. The past was no longer within reach, and no amount of longing or regret could pry it open again. But there was something in the air now, something she could not yet name, but could feel in the depths of her soul. It was the quiet assurance that she was exactly where she needed to be, even if the path ahead was still uncertain. With each step, she found herself shedding the weight of old expectations, the ones that told her life had to unfold in a particular way, that progress was only real if it looked like the plan she had written in her mind. But plans are fragile things, and sometimes they must break so something greater can take their place. She had once thought the loss of her plans meant the loss of her purpose, but now she was beginning to see that purpose was never confined to a single road. It was not found in a door or a title or a place of comfort. It was something deeper, something that stretched far beyond what she had allowed herself to imagine. She was not the only one walking. She could sense that now. There were others who had once stood before closed doors, who had tasted the same disappointment, who had questioned the same silences. And as she moved forward, she began to cross paths with them. Some were still grieving, their eyes heavy with the weight of what they had lost. Some were just beginning to take their first steps, their hands still trembling from the act of letting go. And some had already embraced the journey, walking with a quiet confidence that came from knowing they had survived what they once thought would break them. She listened to their stories, and in them she saw reflections of her own. Different circumstances, different struggles, but the same core of truth. Doors had closed, paths had formed, and the choice had always been the same: stay behind or move forward. Not everyone chose to move. Some remained in the hallway, lingering in the space between what was and what could be, afraid that stepping forward might lead to nothing at all. She understood that fear. She had lived in it. But she had also come to know something deeper than fear: trust. Trust was not easy. It was not the effortless belief that everything would work out exactly as she wanted. No. Trust was waking up every morning and deciding to keep walking, even when the road was steep, even when the skies were heavy with doubt. It was refusing to go back, even when the past whispered its siren song, even when memories tried to convince her that what she had lost was better than what was ahead. Trust was a choice, and she was learning to make it again and again with every step she took. The path was not always straight. Sometimes it curved in unexpected ways, leading her through valleys of uncertainty and hills of quiet revelation. Sometimes it felt as though she was walking in circles, returning to lessons she thought she had already learned. But growth is never a single upward climb. It is a process, a rhythm, a dance between knowing and not knowing, between holding on and letting go. She had once believed that clarity would come all at once, like a sunrise bursting over the horizon, flooding everything with light. But now she understood that clarity was something different. It came in pieces, in moments of stillness, in the slow unveiling of what had always been there but had taken time to see. And with every new piece, she grew stronger, she grew wiser, she grew into the person she had been meant to become, not in spite of the closed doors, but because of them. There were days when she still wondered what might have been. That was human. The mind likes to trace old outlines, to revisit paths that were never walked, to paint pictures of how things could have turned out if only the doors had remained open. But she no longer let those thoughts take root. She no longer let them steal the beauty of what was unfolding before her, because the truth, the undeniable, unshakable truth, was that she had not been abandoned. She had been redirected. She had been guided away from what was never meant to hold her so she could walk toward what had always been waiting. She had spent too long believing that open doors were the only sign of progress. But progress was not always about walking through something visible. Sometimes it was about learning to walk without knowing exactly where the road would lead. It was about choosing to believe that just because she could not yet see the destination did not mean it was not there. It was about trusting that each step mattered, even when it felt small, even when it felt uncertain. There were moments of unexpected beauty along the way. Sunrises she would have missed had she remained behind those doors. Friendships she would have never formed had she not stepped into the unknown. Strength she would have never discovered had she not been forced to stand on her own, to walk by faith and not by sight. The journey was shaping her in ways she had never anticipated, and with every new revelation she felt the weight of the past growing lighter. She began to dream again, not the old dreams, the ones that had been tied to doors that no longer existed, but new ones, ones that felt bigger, wilder, more aligned with who she was becoming, dreams that did not fit into the framework she had once built for herself, but that stretched beyond it, inviting her to step into something she could not yet fully comprehend. And she knew, oh, she knew, that this was not the end of the road. There would be more twists, more turns, more moments where doubt tried to creep in. There would be times when she questioned whether she was still on the right path, when the silence felt heavy, when the temptation to turn back grew strong. But she also knew that she had walked too far, grown too much, come too close to something real to let fear stop her now. She had once feared the closing of doors, but now she understood that every ending carried within it the seeds of a beginning. She had once mourned the loss of familiarity, but now she saw that familiarity had never been the goal. Growth had been. And she had once believed that open doors were the only sign of favor, but now she knew that sometimes the greatest blessings come not in what is given, but in what is taken away. She kept walking, not because she had it all figured out, not because she had reached the final destination, but because she had learned that the journey itself was the gift. Every step, every lesson, every moment of transformation, it was all leading somewhere, shaping her into who she was always meant to be. And so she moved forward, no longer waiting for doors to open, no longer questioning the ones that had closed, because the path before her was no longer something to be feared. It was something to be embraced, to be walked with courage, with trust, with the unwavering belief that what lay ahead would be greater than anything she had left behind. She did not know when it happened, but at some point, the ache of yesterday loosened its grip on her. The sting of closed doors, the weight of rejection, the questions that once circled her mind like restless birds. One by one, they began to fade, not because she had found all the answers, but because she had learned that she did not need them to keep going. The path was teaching her, shaping her, molding her into someone who could walk with or without certainty, someone who no longer needed the comfort of an open door to believe that she was moving towards something greater. She no longer woke up measuring her worth by what had been taken from her. She no longer stood at the edge of her past, begging for things to be different. Somewhere along the way, she had accepted that what was meant to leave had left, and what was meant to stay would find its place in time. This was not resignation. This was not giving up. This was surrender, the kind that does not weaken but strengthens, the kind that does not chain but frees. The more she walked, the more she saw that loss had never been the enemy, it had been the invitation, the call to step beyond what was familiar, beyond what was safe, into a life that was bigger than the one she had built in her mind. She had once thought of closed doors as punishments, but now she saw them for what they were, divine interventions placed in her path not to harm her, but to redirect her, to strip away what was no longer meant for her, to make space for something she could not yet imagine. She had always been afraid of losing control, but now she realized she had never truly had it to begin with. She had tried to map out every step, to write the story ahead of time, to force the narrative to match her expectations, but life had a different script. One that did not bow to her plans, one that did not follow the timelines she had set for herself. And yet, the more she surrendered, the more she saw that she had never been abandoned in the process. Even when she thought she was walking alone, even when the road felt barren and empty, she was never truly without direction. She started noticing the signs, not in grand flashing lights, not in dramatic moments of revelation, but in quiet whispers woven into her everyday life, a conversation that sparked something in her heart, a sudden shift in circumstances that led her somewhere unexpected, a moment of clarity that came not in noise, but in stillness. The doors had closed, yes, but the path had never stopped forming beneath her feet. She began to wonder how many times she had resisted change simply because she had been clinging to a version of life that no longer fit. How many times she had fought to hold on to something that was shrinking her, something that was keeping her small, something that was robbing her of the very growth she had prayed for. It was a sobering thought to realize that sometimes the thing you are mourning is the very thing that was holding you back. But now she was here, walking towards something unknown, something yet to be revealed, and for the first time she was at peace with the not knowing. She no longer needed every detail in advance. She no longer feared the absence of certainty, because she had seen time and time again that what she thought was an ending had always been a beginning in disguise. The journey was not without its challenges. There were still days when doubt knocked on her door, when the past whispered its tempting lullabies, when the road ahead seemed too vast and uncertain. There were moments when she longed for the familiarity of what had been, when she questioned whether she was strong enough, wise enough, capable enough to keep moving forward. But even on those days, even in those moments, she chose to take one more step, because she had come too far to turn back. Because she had seen glimpses of what lay ahead, glimpses of a future that was no longer bound by the limitations of her past. Because she knew now that the closing of doors was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that had been waiting for her all along. She started meeting others who had walked similar roads, others who had faced closed doors and seasons of waiting, others who had wondered if they would ever find their way again. And in their stories, she found echoes of her own. She realized that no one walks this journey alone, that even when the road feels empty, even when it seems like no one else understands, there are always others who have walked before, who have fought the same battles, who have emerged stronger on the other side. And that gave her hope, hope that the path ahead was not just for her, but for everyone willing to take the first step. Hope that no door closed in vain, that no loss was without purpose, that every ending was simply making way for something greater. She no longer begged for old doors to reopen. She no longer waited for permission to move forward. She no longer held onto the past like a lifeline, afraid that letting go meant losing herself, because she had found herself here, on this path, in this journey, in the quiet, steady rhythm of one step after another. She did not know exactly where she was going, but she knew this: she was no longer lost. She was no longer wandering without direction. She was walking purposefully, faithfully, with a heart open to what was ahead. And with each passing day, she understood more and more that every door that had closed was never meant to keep her out, but to guide her home. She walked now with a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that came from knowing exactly where she was going, but the kind that came from knowing she was meant to go. The kind that did not waver when the path was unclear, the kind that was not shaken when the road took an unexpected turn. There was something unbreakable in her now, something that had been forged in the very moments she thought would destroy her. She had been shaped not by ease, but by endurance, not by certainty, but by trust. She remembered the days when she had fought against the closed doors, when she had pleaded for them to open again, when she had spent sleepless nights trying to understand why things had not worked out the way she had planned. She had believed back then that her future had been stolen from her, that the life she had envisioned was slipping through her fingers and she was powerless to stop it. But what she had not yet realized was that the life she was losing was never the life she was meant to hold on to. She saw it now, as clearly as the stars that lit the night sky. The things she had mourned, the opportunities she had lost, the paths she had been denied, none of them had been accidents. They had all been redirections, gentle hands, guiding her away from places that could not hold the fullness of who she was becoming. And as she walked further down this new road, she saw that what she had once called rejection had been protection all along. She did not know why it took her so long to see it. Perhaps it was because she had spent too much time looking back, searching for answers in places where there were none. Perhaps it was because she had tied her identity to things that were never meant to define her. Perhaps it was because she had been afraid to let go, afraid to move forward, afraid to believe that what was ahead could be greater than what was behind. But fear no longer had a place in her heart. She had lived through the worst of it. She had stood in the aftermath of disappointment. and found that she was still standing. She did not rush the journey. She had learned that there was no use in trying to force the road to move faster than it was meant to. She took each day as it came, allowing the path to unfold in its own time. There were still days when she wished she could see further ahead, when she longed for a glimpse of what was waiting at the end of the road. But she had learned to walk without needing all the answers. She had learned to trust that what she needed would come when it was time. The more she walked, the more she realized that she was not the only one on this journey. There were others, so many others, who had stood before closed doors, who had felt the sting of redirection, who had wrestled with the same doubts and questions that had once kept her awake at night. And as she met them, as she listened to their stories, she saw the beauty in the way each of their paths had been shaped. No two journeys were the same, yet every single one had been crafted with purpose. Some had been led away from places that had drained them. Some had been protected from relationships that would have broken them. Some had been guided toward dreams they had never dared to imagine. And though each path was different, there was a common thread woven through them all. A thread of faith, of perseverance, of trust in the unseen. She found herself speaking words she had once needed to hear, words of reassurance, words of hope, words that reminded others that their closed doors were not the end of their stories. She told them what she wished someone had told her in the moments when she had felt lost, that they were not being punished, that they had not been forgotten, that what felt like an ending was, in fact, a beginning in disguise. She could see the relief in their eyes when they realized they were not alone. She knew that feeling well. The quiet comfort that came from knowing that someone else had walked the road before you and had come out on the other side. It was the kind of comfort that did not erase the pain, but made it easier to bear. The kind that did not take away the uncertainty, but made it less daunting. She had once thought that the only way to heal was to find the answers, to understand every why and every how. But now she saw that healing did not come from knowing, it came from trusting. It came from releasing the need to control, from surrendering the need to have every piece of the puzzle before taking the next step. It came from choosing again and again to believe that the road ahead was leading somewhere beautiful, even when she could not yet see it. The further she walked, the lighter she became. She let go of the bitterness she had carried for too long. She released the resentment she had once held toward the doors that had closed. She stopped questioning whether she had done something wrong, stopped wondering if she had somehow missed her chance. She understood now that she had not missed anything. She was exactly where she was meant to be. She no longer longed for what was behind her, not because it had not mattered, but because she had outgrown it. She had become someone new, someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who no longer needed to cling to the past in order to feel secure. She had found her security in something deeper, something that could not be shaken by circumstance or loss. She knew now that the path ahead would not always be easy. There would be more challenges, more uncertainties, more moments where she would have to walk by faith alone, but she was no longer afraid because she had seen time and time again that every time a door closed, a new path was already being built beneath her feet. She did not need to see the destination to know she was going somewhere beautiful. She did not need every answer to know that she was on the right path. She did not need open doors to know that she was still moving forward. And so she walked, not with fear, not with regret, but with a quiet certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The doors that had once seemed like barriers were no longer her concern, for she had come to understand that closed doors were never meant to confine her, but to free her. She had outgrown the spaces she once begged to stay in. She had been guided step by step toward something greater than she had ever imagined. The road ahead was still unfolding, still full of mystery, But she no longer needed to know every detail to move forward. She had learned that faith was not in seeing, but in stepping, not in knowing, but in trusting. And with each step, she walked toward a future that had been waiting for her all along. A future she now embraced with open hands and an unshaken heart.